With her unborn child kicking beneath her bloodied dress, Sarah Bennett stared into the eyes of the Apache chief standing over the bodies of her would-be killers. His outstretched hand would not only save her life, but forever alter the destiny of two warring peoples. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Arizona Territory, 1876. The merciless August sun beat down upon the parched earth, sending waves of heat rippling across the endless horizon. Sarah Bennett pressed a hand against her swollen belly and squinted against the blinding light. 8 months pregnant, her body ached with each jolt of the wagon as it rumbled over the uneven terrain. Her cotton dress, once blue as summer sky, was now faded and stained with the red dust that seemed to find its way into every fold and crease of her existence. Not much longer, she whispered to the life within her, though whether she was reassuring the child or herself, she couldn't say. The wagon train had been traveling for weeks, a desperate journey westward to the settlement of Copper Springs, where her husband Thomas awaited. She hadn't seen him in nearly a year, not since he'd left Pennsylvania to stake their claim in this wild territory, promising to send for her once he'd built them a home. His letters had been sparse but hopeful, painting pictures of fertile land and opportunity that seemed worlds away from the harsh reality surrounding her now. "How you holding up back there, Mrs.?" "Bennett," called Samuel Wilson, the weathered trailmaster who'd been leading their small party of 3 wagons. His voice carried on the dry wind, rough but kind. Sarah managed a smile. "Well enough, Mr. Wilson." It was a lie, and they both knew it. The journey had been harder than anyone had warned, and the baby had been restless these past few days, kicking and turning as if protesting the constant motion. But Sarah Bennett hadn't come this far to complain. Her mother hadn't raised her that way. "We'll stop at Serpent Creek before sundown," Samuel promised, gesturing toward the distant foothills. "Get you some proper rest." The mention of water made Sarah's throat ache with thirst. She reached for the canteen beside her, dismayed to find it nearly empty. Conservation had become second nature out here, where water was more precious than gold. A sharp crack split the air. Sarah froze, the canteen slipping from her fingers, that sound unmistakable even to her eastern ears. A rifle shot. Samuel's body jerked violently, red blooming across his shirt like a terrible flower. He toppled from his horse without a sound. "Bandits!" screamed Margaret Wilson from the lead wagon, her voice shrill with terror. "God help us!" Everything happened at once. More shots rang out, splintering wood and tearing through canvas. Horses screamed in panic. The Cooper's wagon veered sharply as their driver slumped forward, and Sarah watched in horror as it tipped over the edge of the trail, tumbling down the rocky slope with Margaret's screams trailing behind it. Sarah's own driver, young Peter Miller, whipped the horses frantically, trying to outrun the ambush. "Get down, Mrs. Bennett!" he shouted, his boyish face contorted with fear. She dropped to the wagon floor, arms wrapped protectively around her belly, heart hammering so hard she feared it might burst. The wagon lurched and swayed as Peter pushed the horses beyond endurance. Another shot cracked the air. Peter made a choked sound. Sarah looked up to see him sway in his seat, a dark stain spreading across his back. He reached toward her, eyes wide with shock, before pitching forward onto the trail. The horses, panicked and leaderless, veered sharply. The wagon hit something hard, a boulder perhaps, and Sarah was thrown against the side. Pain exploded through her shoulder, wood splintered, the world tilted. She was airborne for a moment, then hitting the ground with bone-jarring force. Instinct made her curl around her unborn child, taking the impact on her side and back. Dust filled her lungs. Something warm and wet trickled down her temple. Disoriented, she pushed herself up on trembling arms. The wagon lay on its side, one wheel still spinning lazily. The horses had broken free and disappeared. Bodies lay scattered on the trail. Samuel, Peter, others from their party. The silence that followed the chaos was somehow worse than the gunfire. Then came the sound of approaching hoofbeats. 3 riders emerged from behind a rock formation, faces obscured by bandanas, eyes cold beneath the brims of their hats, vultures circling fallen prey. "Well, well," drawled the leader, dismounting with casual grace. "Looks like we missed one." Sarah tried to scramble backward, but her body betrayed her. Her dress snagged on something, a splintered board, trapping her. "Please," she gasped, one hand protectively covering her belly. "I have nothing of value." The man laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "That's where you're wrong, ma'am." His eyes traveled over her, lingering on her swollen middle. "A pretty thing like you has plenty to offer men who've been on the trail too long." His companions snickered, dismounting and spreading out to block any escape route she might have contemplated. "And after we're done," continued the leader, drawing a knife from his belt, "we'll see what that belly of yours is hiding. Heard tell that unborn babes have special properties. Medicine men pay good money for such things." Horror crashed over Sarah like ice water. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything she'd endured to get here. Not when Thomas was waiting. Not when their child was so close to drawing its first breath. The leader took a step toward her, knife glinting in the merciless sun. From a ridge above the trail, silent as death itself, a figure watched the scene unfold. The observer's dark eyes narrowed beneath a headband adorned with a single eagle feather. His weathered face, marked with the lines of 45 summers, remained expressionless, but his hand tightened around the shaft of his spear. Running Wolf, war chief of the Black Mountain Apache, had seen enough. Running Wolf had not intended to witness white men's business. The Peace Council with the Army's representatives had left a bitter taste in his mouth, promises like dry creek beds that might never see water. For 3 days, he had listened to empty words from men who spoke with forked tongues while their eyes revealed their true feelings. The Black Mountain Apache were to be contained, restricted to land nobody else wanted, in exchange for a fragile peace. He had agreed to consider their terms, not because he believed them, but because his people were tired. Too many winters had passed in bloodshed. Too many children had never grown to adulthood. Too many wives had become widows, including his own. The memory of Morning Star rose unbidden in his mind as he watched the white woman below, her hands protectively cradling the swell of new life. 7 winters had passed since Morning Star, and their unborn child had been taken by soldiers who saw no difference between warriors and women. 7 winters of a cold emptiness that no campfire could warm. Running Wolf had been returning alone to his people when he spotted the dust of the wagon train. Curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, had led him to observe from the ridge. He had seen many such parties cross Apache land, had sometimes ordered attacks against them, sometimes allowed them passage. They were invaders, after all, trespassers on land that had belonged to his ancestors since before memory. But he had never witnessed such naked savagery as what unfolded below. These were not his people's enemies. They were their own kind, preying upon the vulnerable like coyotes. "The white man brings his own disease," he murmured to himself in Apache. He should leave. This was not his concern. The woman's fate, tragic though it might be, was not his responsibility. His people would question his judgment if he involved himself in white affairs. The leader of the bandits advanced toward the woman, knife extended. Her face, even from this distance, was a mask of terror and desperation. Running Wolf closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, his decision was made. He moved silently down the rocky slope, years of hunting making his footfalls whisper quiet despite his powerful frame. The bandits, focused on their prey, remained oblivious to the predator now stalking them. "Ain't no use fighting, ma'am," the bandit leader was saying, close enough now that Sarah could smell the tobacco and whiskey on his breath. "You might even enjoy yourself if you cooperate." "Go to hell," Sarah spat, her voice steadier than she felt. The man's face darkened. "Guess we'll do this the hard way then." He reached for her, fingers inches from her throat, when a sound stopped him. A strange, bird-like whistle that didn't belong in this barren landscape. The bandit turned, confused. The war cry that followed froze his blood. Running Wolf burst from the cover of scrub brush, a blur of motion and purpose. His first spear found its mark in the chest of the nearest bandit, who dropped without a sound. The second man had time only to fumble for his pistol before Running Wolf was upon him, knife flashing in the sunlight. The leader, quicker than his companions, managed to fire a wild shot that grazed Running Wolf's shoulder. The Apache chief barely flinched. With fluid grace, he closed the distance between them, ducking beneath a desperate swing of the bandit's knife. The fight was brief and decisive. Running Wolf had not been named war chief for his mercy. When it was done, 3 bodies lay in the dust alongside those of the wagon train party. Running Wolf stood motionless, blood dripping from a shallow cut on his arm, his breathing steady as if he'd done nothing more strenuous than walk across a meadow. Only then did he turn his attention to the woman. Sarah Bennett stared at her unlikely savior with wide, uncertain eyes. She had heard stories about the Apache, terrible stories of torture and mutilation. This warrior, tall and imposing with his painted face and feathered headband, embodied every frightening tale she'd been told since crossing into the territory. And yet, he had saved her life. You killed them," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Running Wolf studied her with dark, impenetrable eyes. Then, to her astonishment, he responded in heavily accented but understandable English, "Yes." A single word, devoid of remorse or explanation. Sarah shifted uncomfortably, wincing at the pain in her side where she'd struck the ground. Her dress was torn, her hair fallen loose from its pins, and blood, whether hers or someone else's, she couldn't tell, stained her sleeve. "Thank you," she said finally, because it seemed the only appropriate response. Running Wolf said nothing. He moved methodically around the site, retrieving his spear from the bandit's chest, wiping his knife clean on the man's shirt. Sarah watched him warily, uncertain of her situation. Had she been saved from one danger only to face another? As if sensing her thoughts, Running Wolf paused in his movements. He gestured to her belly. "Child comes soon." Sarah's hand instinctively went to her middle. "A month more, if God is willing." Running Wolf's expression remained unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes, a shadow of emotion quickly suppressed. "Husband?" he asked. "Would in Copper Springs," Sarah replied, hope flaring within her. "To the west. He's waiting for me." Running Wolf surveyed the devastation around them, the overturned wagon, the scattered supplies, the bodies baking in the relentless sun. Even if she had a horse, no white woman in her condition could travel alone through Apache territory and survive. Hostiles, settlers, wild animals, the terrain itself, all would claim her before she traveled 10 miles. He looked to the sky, measuring the hours of daylight remaining. Then he made his second decision of the day, one that would change not only their lives, but the course of 2 peoples. "I will take you. I cannot go with you," Sarah said, her voice trembling despite her effort to appear strong. "I don't even know you." Running Wolf regarded her impassively. "You die here, or with me, maybe live." He gestured to the desolate landscape surrounding them. No water, no horse, no gun. Each statement fell like a stone. Baby die too. The brutal simplicity of his assessment struck Sarah with the force of physical pain. She looked around at the bodies of those who had promised to deliver her safely to Thomas. They had been good people. Kind people. Now they were empty vessels baking under the Arizona sun. The others, she said, we can't just leave them like this. Running Wolf considered her words, then nodded once. Ground too hard for burial. He walked to the nearest body, Samuel Wilson, and began dragging it toward a cluster of rocks. Help if you can. For the next hour, they worked in silence. Running Wolf moved the men's bodies while Sarah, limited by her condition, gathered stones. Together they created crude cairns over each of the fallen, protection from scavengers if nothing else. Sarah whispered prayers over each pile of stones, tears tracking clean lines through the dust on her face. She did not approach the bandits' bodies, and Running Wolf did not move them. The desert would claim what it wanted. When the grim task was complete, Running Wolf salvaged what he could from the wreckage: a canteen still half full, a small sack of cornmeal, a blanket, and miraculously, Sarah's small carpet bag containing her few personal possessions. The last wagon's axle had broken beyond repair, and the horses were long gone. "We walk until nightfall," Running Wolf announced, slinging the supplies across his back. Sarah's feet ached at the mere thought, but she nodded resolutely. What choice did she have? They set out with the sun still high, Running Wolf setting a pace that challenged Sarah without breaking her. He moved with the practiced efficiency of a man who had traveled these lands his entire life, always alert, eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Occasionally he would stop, kneel to examine tracks or broken vegetation, then adjust their course slightly. "How far is Copper Springs?" Sarah asked after they had been walking for what felt like hours. 3 days, maybe 4. Her heart sank. "I can't walk for 4 days," she rested a hand on her belly. "Not like this." Running Wolf's gaze dropped to her midsection. 2 days to my people's camp. Rest there, then continue. The mention of his people sent a chill through Sarah. The newspapers back east were filled with stories of Apache raids, burning homesteads, scalped settlers, women carried off to fates worse than death. "Your people won't welcome me," she said softly. Running Wolf's expression didn't change. "I am chief. They will do as I say." They continued in silence as the landscape gradually transformed around them. The flat, exposed terrain gave way to rocky outcroppings and scattered juniper trees, offering occasional respites of shade. Running Wolf pointed out a distant smudge on the horizon. "Mountains," he explained, "where his people made their summer camps." As the sun began its descent, Sarah felt a sharp cramp seize her abdomen. She gasped, doubling over. Running Wolf was at her side instantly, his hand on her elbow, steadying her. "What is wrong?" "I don't know," she panted, fear rising in her throat. "Something's not right." He guided her to a flat rock beneath a twisted juniper. "Sit." The cramp subsided as quickly as it had come, leaving Sarah shaken. "The baby's not due for weeks yet." Running Wolf's face revealed nothing, but his voice gentled. "Journey is hard. Baby feels it." He handed her the canteen. "Drink. Rest now." As Sarah sipped the precious water, Running Wolf gathered dry brush and built a small, smokeless fire with practiced efficiency. The evening air was rapidly cooling, the heat of the day surrendering to the desert night. "Were you really at a peace council?" Sarah asked, watching him work. Running Wolf glanced up, surprise briefly crossing his features. "Yes." "Army men talk much, say little. My husband told me there was a treaty." Treaty! Running Wolf spat the word like something bitter. White man's paper. Means nothing when gold is found or more land wanted. Sarah considered his words. Her husband's letters had been full of opportunity, of land there for the taking. She had never questioned whose land it might have been before. "You speak English well," she observed. A shadow passed over Running Wolf's face. "Mission school, 3 years, before I ran away." As darkness fully enveloped them, Sarah found herself studying her unlikely protector in the firelight. His features were stern, weathered by sun and wind, yet there was a dignity in his bearing that commanded respect. Not the savage from dime store novels, but a man of complexity and depth. "Why did you save me?" she asked suddenly. "You could have left me to die." Running Wolf stared into the flames, and for a long moment Sarah thought he might not answer. "I had wife once," he said finally, his voice so low she had to lean forward to hear. "She carried child like you." He met Sarah's gaze, and the pain she saw there stole her breath. Soldiers did not save her. Sarah's hand moved to her belly protectively. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Running Wolf nodded once, then rose to his feet. "Sleep now, tomorrow, hard journey." As Sarah lay wrapped in the salvaged blanket, staring up at the vast canopy of stars, she realized that the man standing guard at the edge of their small camp was neither the monster of her fears nor the noble savage of romantic imagination. He was simply a human being, as complex and contradictory as any she had ever known. And for reasons she couldn't fully explain, that knowledge helped her close her eyes and surrender to exhaustion. Dawn broke with ferocious heat already rising from the earth. Sarah awoke to find Running Wolf returning to their small camp. 3 desert quail dangling from his hand. She had not heard him leave, had not stirred once during the night, despite sleeping on hard ground with only a thin blanket between her and the rocky soil. "You hunt well," she observed, struggling to sit up with her ungainly body. "Land provides if you know how to ask," Running Wolf replied. He set about preparing the birds with practiced movements, his knife flashing in the early sunlight. Sarah watched him work, wondering how to make herself useful. Back home in Pennsylvania, she had never been idle. Even as the daughter of a prosperous merchant, she had learned to cook, sew, tend gardens, skills her father deemed necessary for any wife, regardless of station. But here, in this harsh landscape, she felt utterly helpless. "May I help?" she asked. Running Wolf glanced up, seemingly surprised by the offer. After a moment's consideration, he handed her several long, straight sticks he had gathered. "They clean these for cooking spits." Sarah set about removing the small shoots and bark with her fingernails, grateful for the task. As they worked in companionable silence, she studied her surroundings in the clear morning light. The landscape, which had seemed so barren and hostile the previous day, now revealed subtle beauties. The delicate purple of distant mountains, the complex patterns of lichen on nearby rocks, a tiny lizard sunning itself on a stone. Running Wolf built a small fire, and soon the quail were roasting, filling the air with a tantalizing aroma that made Sarah's stomach growl audibly. She blushed, but Running Wolf's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Baby hungry?" he said. "Good sign." When the birds were cooked, he offered her the largest portion. Sarah accepted gratefully, trying to eat slowly despite her ravenous hunger. The meat was gamey but delicious, and she realized it was her first hot meal in days. "We must reach water by midday," Running Wolf said as they finished eating. "Can you walk?" Sarah nodded, though her body ached in places she hadn't known could ache. "I'm stronger than I look." "I see this," he acknowledged, and Sarah felt an unexpected warmth at the simple recognition. They set out as the sun continued its relentless climb. Running Wolf led them through increasingly rugged terrain, always seeming to find the easiest path for Sarah to navigate. When they encountered steep inclines, he would extend his hand to help her up, withdrawing it the moment she was secure, as if prolonged contact was forbidden. By mid-morning, the heat had become oppressive. Sarah's dress clung to her back, soaked with perspiration, and her swollen feet felt as though they were being crushed with each step. But she pressed on without complaint, determined not to become a burden. When they crested a particularly challenging rise, Running Wolf paused, pointing to a ribbon of green snaking through the valley below. "Water," he said, "and shade." The promise of relief gave Sarah renewed energy. As they descended toward the stream, Running Wolf suddenly raised his hand in a signal to stop. His posture had changed, body tense, head slightly tilted as if listening. "What is it?" Sarah whispered. "Riders," he replied softly. 4, maybe 5. Fear clawed at Sarah's throat. "Bandits? Or soldiers?" His tone suggested he wasn't certain which would be worse. He scanned their surroundings, then pointed to a cluster of boulders and scrubby trees. "Hide there! Do not move until I return." "You're leaving me!" Panic edged her voice. "To see who comes," he explained. "If I do not return by sundown, follow the stream east." Eventually reach settlement called Broken Arrow. "And if they're bandits," Running Wolf's expression hardened, "then I will not return, and you must go alone." Before she could protest further, he was gone, moving across the landscape with an animal grace that allowed him to seemingly disappear into the sparse vegetation. Sarah made her way to the hiding place he had indicated, wedging herself between 2 sun-warmed boulders and pulling scrub branches around her as best she could. The minutes stretched into an eternity of silence, broken only by the distant call of birds and the whisper of wind through dry grass. Sarah's hand rested on her belly, feeling the reassuring movements of the child within. She spoke to it silently, making promises she wasn't sure she could keep. The sound of hoofbeats finally reached her ears. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows of her hiding place, holding her breath as 5 riders appeared in the valley below. Even from this distance, the blue uniforms were unmistakable. Soldiers. She watched as they dismounted by the stream, allowing their horses to drink while they refilled canteens. One man pointed at something on the ground, and Sarah realized with dread that they had discovered tracks, hers or Running Wolf's. She couldn't be sure. The soldiers spread out, clearly searching. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She could call out to them, reveal herself. They were her countrymen, after all, sworn to protect settlers like her. But Running Wolf's words echoed in her mind. Soldiers did not save her. His pregnant wife, killed by men in uniforms like these. The minutes crawled by as the soldiers continued their search, moving methodically across the valley floor. Then, as if summoned by some silent signal, they regrouped, mounted their horses, and continued westward, away from Sarah's position. She sagged with relief, only to stiffen again moments later when a shadow fell across her hiding place. "They are gone," Running Wolf said quietly. Sarah emerged from her shelter on shaky legs. "They were looking for something." "For someone," he corrected. "Riders came from direction of wagon attack, found bodies, maybe." The implication hung between them. If the soldiers had found the scene of the ambush, they would have discovered not only the settlers' remains, but also the bodies of the bandits, killed by Apache weapons. "They'll think your people attacked the wagon train," Sarah realized aloud. Running Wolf nodded grimly. Always easiest to blame Apache. But that's not what happened. I could tell them the truth. His dark eyes studied her. "Would they believe white woman who travels with Apache?" The question struck Sarah with unexpected force. She had been raised to respect authority, to trust in the institutions of law and government. But in this vast, lawless territory, who decided what was truth and what would happen to Running Wolf if she revealed their alliance? "We must move quickly now," Running Wolf said, interrupting her thoughts. "Reach my people before soldiers find us." As they hurried toward the stream, Sarah found herself caught between worlds, belonging fully to neither. For the first time, she wondered if Running Wolf felt the same. The stream was a blessing, cool, clear water flowing through a corridor of cottonwood trees that provided precious shade. Sarah knelt at the water's edge, savoring the relief as she splashed her face and neck. She cupped her hands and drank deeply, the cold liquid soothing her parched throat. Running Wolf stood guard, his vigilance never wavering. Only when Sarah had refreshed herself did he kneel to drink, and even then, his eyes continuously scanned their surroundings. "We rest here," he announced. "1 hour, no more." Sarah nodded gratefully, lowering herself onto a smooth rock at the water's edge. She removed her boots, a painful process, to find her ankles swollen and red. Running Wolf noticed her discomfort. "Put feet in water," he instructed. "Cold helps swelling." She obeyed, sighing with pleasure as the cool stream enveloped her aching feet. Running Wolf, meanwhile, replenished their canteen and soaked the blanket, wringing it out and offering it to her. For neck and head, keep cool. His thoughtfulness surprised her. "Thank you," she said, draping the damp cloth around her shoulders. The coolness against her skin was heavenly. "Have you been chief for long?" she asked, seeking to understand this complex man who had become her protector. Running Wolf sat on his haunches nearby, still alert but willing to converse. "5 winters since father died." "So it passes from father to son?" "Not always. Must be earned. Must be respected." He picked up a smooth stone and turned it in his hand. "My father was great chief, strong but wise. I try to be like him." "I think you are," Sarah said softly. "Strong but wise." Running Wolf's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes, perhaps surprise, perhaps gratitude for the simple acknowledgement. "Your husband," he said, changing the subject. What kind of man?" Sarah smiled, thinking of Thomas. "Kind, hard-working. He has dreams bigger than the Pennsylvania sky." Her hand absently caressed her belly. "He's been in Copper Springs for nearly a year now, establishing our homestead. We have 20 acres to farm." 20 acres, Running Wolf repeated, his tone unreadable. "Once, all land belonged to Apache. No acres to count." Sarah fell silent, discomfort creeping through her. She had never considered their homestead might once have been someone else's. As if sensing her unease, Running Wolf stood. Time to go, still far to camp. They continued their journey, following the stream for as long as their path allowed. The water's proximity made the travel more bearable, though the terrain grew increasingly rugged. Twice they had to navigate steep ravines, Running Wolf helping Sarah with firm but gentle hands. "You said you were in a mission school," Sarah ventured as they walked. "Did they teach you about our God?" Running Wolf's face hardened slightly. "They tried, said Apache gods were demons." He looked skyward. "But Yusun, the life-giver, still listens, still provides." "I believe God has many names," Sarah offered. "Perhaps Yusun is one of them." Running Wolf glanced at her with a look that might have been approval. "You think differently than other white women I have met." Before Sarah could respond, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, more intense than the cramp from the previous day. She gasped, stumbling to her knees. Running Wolf was at her side instantly. "What is wrong?" "The baby," she managed between clenched teeth. "Something's not right." Fear darkened his features. too early for birth." "Yes," she panted as the pain subsided. "At least 3 weeks too early." Running Wolf scanned the surrounding terrain with new urgency. "Need shelter. Safe place." He pointed to a rocky outcropping about half a mile ahead. "There. Caves sometimes." He helped her to her feet, supporting much of her weight as they made their slow way toward the rocks. The pain came twice more during their journey, each episode leaving Sarah weaker and more frightened. They found not a cave but a deep overhang in the cliff face, providing shelter from both sun and prying eyes. Running Wolf eased Sarah down onto the sandy floor of their natural refuge. "Rest," he said. "I find medicine." "Don't leave me," Sarah pleaded, gripping his arm with surprising strength. "Must find plants, help pain." His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "My return quickly." True to his word, Running Wolf was back within half an hour, his hands full of various plants and roots. He set about preparing them with practiced efficiency, crushing some with rocks, soaking others in water from the canteen. "What are those?" Sarah asked, watching through waves of discomfort. "Blue cohosh," he said, holding up a root. "Good for women's pain." He indicated a leafy plant. "Wild yam." "Stops early birth." He crushed them together into a paste. "Mission school taught books. My mother taught plants, her knowledge more useful." He offered Sarah a small amount of the bitter mixture. "Chew slowly, swallow juice." Sarah hesitated only briefly before accepting the medicine. The taste was vile, but she forced herself to chew as instructed. Running Wolf, meanwhile, mixed another concoction with water from the canteen and bathed her forehead with it. The liquid had a cooling, numbing effect that helped ease her distress. As the herbal remedies began to take effect, Sarah's pain gradually subsided to a dull ache. The immediate crisis seemed to pass, but both knew it could return at any moment. "Thank you," she said softly. "You saved me. Again." Running Wolf shook his head. "Implants saved you. Knowledge of ancestors." They sat in silence as the light outside their shelter began to fade. Sarah studied her protector's profile against the deepening shadows. "What was her name?" she asked. "Your wife." For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, softly, "Morning Star." "That's beautiful." She was beautiful. His voice held a tenderness Sarah hadn't heard before. "I'd like sunrise over mountains." "How did she die?" Sarah asked gently. "If you wish to tell me." Running Wolf was still for so long that Sarah feared she had overstepped. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled, but beneath it ran a current of old pain. "Soldiers attacked winter camp, looking for warriors who raided settlement." His hands tightened into fists. "I was away hunting. When I returned, many dead." "Morning Star," he paused, gathering himself. "She tried to run. Soldiers shot her in back." Sarah's hand went to her mouth in horror. "And the baby died with mother," he said simply, the words containing a universe of grief. "I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Running Wolf nodded once, accepting her sympathy, but offering no more of his story. After a moment, he stood and moved to the entrance of their shelter, staring out at the darkening landscape. "We are close to my people's territory," he said. "We'll reach camp by midday tomorrow." Sarah shifted uncomfortably, anxiety rising anew. "Will they welcome me?" Running Wolf turned to face her, his expression solemn in the fading light. "They will question, they will fear, but they will obey their chief." He knelt beside her. "You are under my protection. No harm will come." As night fell completely, they shared the last of their meager provisions. Running Wolf built a small, nearly smokeless fire that cast dancing shadows on the rock walls surrounding them. "If the baby comes early," Sarah said quietly, voicing the fear that had been growing in her mind, "will I reach Thomas in time?" Running Wolf's dark eyes reflected the firelight. Apache women are strong in birth. "You are strong too, I have seen this." He added more fuel to the small flame. "But if child comes, my people will help. Have skilled healers, better than white doctors who bleed the sick." The simple confidence in his voice provided more comfort than platitudes would have. Sarah leaned back against the cool stone wall, her hand resting protectively over her belly, where the child had grown strangely quiet. "Sleep," Running Wolf advised. "And tomorrow we reach safety?" As Sarah drifted into an uneasy slumber, she wondered what safety truly meant in this harsh land where bloodshed and mistrust had reigned for generations, and what it would mean for a white woman to enter an Apache camp under the protection of their chief. They began their journey before dawn, moving through the landscape like shadows. Running Wolf seemed to grow more alert with each passing mile, his movements increasingly cautious as they entered what Sarah assumed was Apache territory. He spoke little, and Sarah followed his example, conserving her strength for the final leg of their journey. By mid-morning, the terrain had changed dramatically. Gone were the exposed plains, replaced by pine-studded slopes and hidden valleys. The air was cooler here, fragrant with resin and wildflowers. Under different circumstances, Sarah might have found it beautiful. "Stop," Running Wolf said suddenly, raising his hand. Sarah froze, her heart quickening. "What is it?" "We are watched." She scanned the surrounding forest, but saw nothing. Running Wolf, however, lifted his chin and called out in Apache, his voice carrying through the trees. After a moment's silence, an answering call came from somewhere to their left. Two figures materialized from the forest, young men with hard eyes and weapons at the ready. They regarded Sarah with undisguised suspicion, speaking rapidly to Running Wolf in their native tongue. The conversation was tense, with sharp gestures towards Sarah. Running Wolf responded firmly, his stance widening slightly, a subtle but unmistakable assertion of authority. One of the young men protested, his voice rising, but fell silent when Running Wolf cut him off with a single sharp word. "They will escort us to camp," Running Wolf explained to Sarah, switching to English. "Stay close." The young warriors led the way, occasionally glancing back at Sarah with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. She walked with her head high, one hand supporting her belly, determined not to show fear. They crested a wooded hill, and suddenly the Apache camp lay before them, a collection of wickiups nestled in a protected valley beside a small, clear lake. Horses grazed in a meadow, children played near the water's edge, and smoke rose from cooking fires. It looked, Sarah thought with surprise, remarkably like any frontier settlement, save for the style of the dwellings. Their approach was quickly noticed. Children stopped their games to stare, women paused in their work, and men reached for weapons. Within moments, they were surrounded by Apache warriors, their expressions grim and unwelcoming. An elderly man with deeply lined features stepped forward, addressing Running Wolf in a voice that crackled with anger. Running Wolf listened without interruption, his face impassive. When the elder finished, Running Wolf responded calmly but with unmistakable authority, gesturing occasionally towards Sarah. The gathered Apache listened intently, their reactions mixed, some nodding, others scowling or whispering among themselves. Sarah stood perfectly still, acutely aware of being the focus of so many hostile eyes. Finally, Running Wolf turned to her. "This is Tall Bear, an elder of our council," he said, indicating the old man. "He questions why I bring white woman to our sacred place." Sarah swallowed hard. "What did you tell him?" "The truth, that you were attacked, that your people were killed, that your child might come early." His dark eyes held hers. "That you are under my protection until you reach your husband." A woman pushed through the crowd, slender, middle-aged, with dignity in her bearing. She spoke directly to Running Wolf, her tone questioning but not confrontational. Her gaze moved to Sarah's swollen belly, then back to the chief's face. "This is Dove's Wing," Running Wolf explained. "Our healer. She asks about your pains." "Tell her they come and go," Sarah replied. "Less since your medicine, but still there." As Running Wolf translated, Dove's Wing approached Sarah cautiously. Without asking permission, she placed her hand on Sarah's abdomen, her touch firm but gentle. Sarah remained still, understanding instinctively that this was a crucial moment. Dove's Wing closed her eyes, concentrating on what she felt beneath her palm. After a long moment, she nodded and spoke to Running Wolf. "She says, 'Child is restless but strong,'" he translated. "Wants to come sooner than it should. Can she help?" Sarah asked, hope and fear mingling in her voice. Running Wolf conferred briefly with the healer, who nodded. "She will try. Has stronger medicine than what I gathered." Tall Bear interrupted, his voice sharp. Another warrior, younger, with a scar running from temple to jaw, joined in, pointing accusingly at Sarah. The tension in the air thickened. "What are they saying?" Sarah whispered. Running Wolf's jaw tightened. "Tall Bear says you cannot stay. Scarred One, Swift Knife, says you are spy for Bluecoats." "That's ridiculous," Sarah protested. "I'm not—" "I know this," Running Wolf cut her off. "But they do not." He addressed the gathered Apache again, his voice carrying the weight of command. Whatever he said silenced the protests, though the hostility remained palpable. After what seemed an eternity, Tall Bear gave a curt nod and stepped back. "You will stay," Running Wolf told Sarah. "In my family's wiki-up, Dove's Wing will attend you." His expression remained grave. "Do not wander alone. Some still disagree with my decision." With that, the crowd slowly dispersed, though many continued to watch Sarah from a distance. Dove's Wing approached again, gesturing for Sarah to follow her. Running Wolf nodded his permission. "I must speak with council," he said. "We'll come later." Sarah followed the healer through the camp, acutely aware of the stairs tracking her progress. Children peeked from behind their mothers, old women whispered behind gnarled hands, and warriors fingered their weapons as she passed. Dove's Wing led her to a large wiki-up set slightly apart from the others. Inside, it was surprisingly spacious and cool, with woven mats covering the ground and various possessions neatly arranged around the perimeter. A small fire pit occupied the center, currently cold. The healer gestured for Sarah to sit, then left briefly, returning with a water skin and a wooden bowl containing a dark paste similar to what Running Wolf had prepared. She offered the water first, which Sarah accepted gratefully, then indicated she should eat some of the paste. Without Running Wolf to translate, communication was difficult, but Sarah did her best to comply with the healer's instructions. The medicine was bitter, but she forced it down, trusting this woman who had agreed to help her despite the objections of her people. Dove's Wing examined her with methodical thoroughness, paying special attention to her swollen ankles and the tightness of her belly. Her touch was clinical but not unkind, and Sarah found herself relaxing despite the strangeness of the situation. When the examination was complete, Dove's Wing prepared a bed of soft furs and gestured for Sarah to lie down. Exhaustion suddenly overwhelmed her, the past days of trauma and exertion crashing down all at once. She sank onto the makeshift bed, murmuring her thanks. The healer nodded, seeming to understand the sentiment, if not the words. She mimed sleeping, then pointed to herself and the entrance, indicating she would stand guard. With that small reassurance, Sarah allowed her eyes to close. She awakened sometime later to the sound of raised voices outside the wickiup. Night had fallen, and the only light came from a small fire now burning in the central pit. Sarah pushed herself up on her elbows, listening intently. Though she couldn't understand the words, the tone was unmistakable. Argument, perhaps even confrontation. One voice she recognized as Running Wolf's, firm and commanding. Another, younger and hot with anger, seemed to be challenging him. The hide covering the entrance was suddenly pushed aside, and Running Wolf entered, his expression stormy. He paused when he saw Sarah awake, visibly composing himself. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "Council meeting," he replied, moving to sit across the fire from her. "Some disagree with my decisions. Because of me." He didn't deny it. "Swift Knife leads opposition, says I betray Apache by helping white woman." Sarah sat up fully, wrapping a fur around her shoulders against the night chill. "Perhaps I should leave." "I don't want to cause division among your people." "No." Running Wolf's response was immediate and firm. "Not safe. Soldiers still search. And child." He gestured to her belly. "Too dangerous." "Then what will you do?" Running Wolf stared into the small fire, shadows playing across his strong features. "What chief must do? Protect all people, even those who disagree." His eyes lifted to meet hers. "Even you." The simple declaration hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning Sarah wasn't entirely sure she understood or was ready to acknowledge. "Dove's wing says you rested well," Running Wolf continued, changing the subject. "Medicine helps." "Yes," Sarah nodded. "The pain has eased." "Good. Tomorrow she makes stronger medicine." "Keep child waiting until right time." Sarah's hand moved to her belly, feeling the reassuring movement within. "Thank you for everything." Running Wolf acknowledged her gratitude with a slight nod, then rose. "You sleep here. I sleep outside. Keep watch." "This is your home," Sarah protested. "I shouldn't take your place." "Was my father's," he corrected. "Now mine, and tonight, yours." He moved toward the entrance, then paused. "Rest well, Sarah Bennett." It was the first time he had used her name, and something about hearing it in his deep voice sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. "Rest well, Running Wolf," she replied softly. After he had gone, Sarah lay back on the furs, staring up at the conical ceiling of the wickiup. Outside, she could hear the night sounds of the camp, distant singing, dogs barking, the murmur of conversations in a language she didn't understand. She was an outsider here, unwelcome by many, a potential threat to the fragile peace of this hidden community. And yet, against all odds, she felt safer than she had since leaving Pennsylvania. As she drifted back to sleep, Sarah wondered what Thomas would think if he could see her now, resting in an Apache chief's dwelling, protected by a man who, according to everything she had been taught, should have been her enemy. Dawn filtered through the smoke hole of the wickiup, painting golden patterns on the earthen floor. Sarah awakened slowly, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The events of the past days crashed back. The attack, Running Wolf's rescue, their arduous journey, and finally, this Apache camp where she now found herself, an unwelcome intruder. She sat up carefully, her body stiff but surprisingly rested. The medicine Dove's wing had given her seemed to have calmed both her pains and the restless movements of the baby. a small victory, but one Sarah clutched gratefully. The hide covering the entrance rustled, and a young Apache woman entered, carrying a wooden bowl of what appeared to be porridge. She couldn't have been more than 16, with wary eyes and a guarded expression. She set the bowl beside Sarah without meeting her gaze, then retreated to the entrance, clearly uncomfortable but apparently assigned to attend to the white woman. "Thank you," Sarah said, smiling tentatively. The girl glanced at her briefly, then looked away. "Eat," she said in halting English, surprising Sarah. "Good for baby." Sarah picked up the bowl, finding the porridge to be a mixture of ground corn and berries, sweetened with what might have been honey. It was delicious, and she realized how hungry she had become. "You speak English very well," she ventured between bites. The girl hesitated, then replied softly, "Mission school." 2 years, like running wolf, Sarah thought. "What's your name?" "Little Sparrow." The girl seemed to relax slightly. "Dove's Wing is my mother. She's very kind to help me," Sarah said. "Please thank her for me." Little Sparrow nodded, then asked with cautious curiosity, "Your baby? When it comes?" "Soon, I think. Though it shouldn't come for a few more weeks." Sarah rested her hand on her belly. "Oh, do you have children?" The question brought a flush to the girl's cheeks. "No, not yet." She glanced toward the entrance. "Someday, with Grey Fox." Sarah smiled, recognizing the universal language of young love. "Your sweetheart." Little Sparrow nodded, a small smile finally breaking through her reserve. The moment of connection was interrupted by Dove's Wing's arrival. The healer spoke sharply to her daughter, who immediately straightened and backed away from Sarah. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, though she wasn't sure what offense she might have committed. "We were just talking." Dove's Wing ignored her, checking Sarah's forehead for fever and examining her ankles for swelling. Apparently satisfied, she mixed a fresh batch of the bitter medicine and instructed Sarah to eat it, the directions conveyed through gestures rather than words. Little Sparrow watched silently from the corner, her brief openness replaced by the same wariness Sarah had seen in the other Apache. Whatever brief connection they had established was gone, reminding Sarah forcefully of her outsider status. After Dove's Wing departed, Sarah attempted to rise, finding her legs unsteady but functional. Little Sparrow hurried to her side, supporting her elbow. "I need air," Sarah explained, gesturing toward the entrance. "Just outside, please." The girl hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. She helped Sarah to the entrance and peered out, apparently checking that the coast was clear before allowing Sarah to step outside. The morning air was crisp and sweet, the camp already busy with daily activities. Women worked at cooking fires or scraped hides stretched on frames. Children chased each other between dwellings, their laughter a universal sound that made Sarah smile. Warriors maintained weapons or tended to horses, their movements efficient and practiced. It was, Sarah realized, a community not so different from the small Pennsylvania town she had left behind. People living, working, loving, surviving together. The thought was both comforting and unsettling, challenging notions she had carried across the continent. Her appearance drew immediate attention. Conversations halted and heads turned in her direction. Some expressions were merely curious, others openly hostile. A group of warriors near the central fire watched her with particular intensity. One of them, the scarred man called Swift Knife, muttering something that caused his companions to laugh darkly. "Should go inside," Little Sparrow murmured anxiously. "Not safe." Before Sarah could respond, a commotion at the edge of camp drew everyone's attention. Running Wolf appeared, leading a hunting party, returning with a deer slung across a pole. The hunters moved with the proud stride of success, but as they entered the camp, the atmosphere shifted perceptibly. Several warriors approached Running Wolf, speaking rapidly and gesturing towards Sarah. The chief listened impassively, his expression revealing nothing. When they finished, he responded briefly, then turned to look directly at Sarah. The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. He handed off his share of the hunt to another warrior and strode purposefully toward her, his bearing that of a man accustomed to command. "You should be resting," he said when he reached her, his tone softer than his expression had suggested. "I needed fresh air," Sarah explained. "Your wickiup is very comfortable, but not safe outside," he interrupted, echoing Little Sparrow's warning. Some warriors angry. "Say bluecoats near." Sarah's heart quickened. "Soldiers, how near?" "Searching mountains west of here." His jaw tightened. "Looking for Apache who attacked wagon train." "But that's not what happened," Sarah protested. "I could tell them the truth." Running Wolf's expression darkened. "Truth is what winners say it is, always has been." He glanced at the watching warriors. "Come. We talk inside." Once back within the privacy of the wickiup, Running Wolf's posture relaxed slightly. Little Sparrow retreated to a corner, trying to make herself invisible. "Hunters saw soldier camp," Running Wolf explained, his voice low. "Many men, following tracks." "They're looking for me," Sarah realized aloud. "They must have found the wagon train and assume I was taken captive. Or killed by Apache," Running Wolf added grimly. "Either way, they seek blood." "I need to reach Thomas," Sarah said, anxiety rising within her. "He must be frantic if word has reached Copper Springs." Running Wolf considered this. "Copper Springs is 2 days' journey still, hard travel." "I know, but..." Sarah broke off as a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, stronger than any previous contraction. She gasped, clutching at her belly. Running Wolf was at her side instantly, his strong hands supporting her as her knees buckled. Little Sparrow rushed forward as well, helping guide Sarah back to the fur bed. "Get Dove's wing!" Running Wolf ordered the girl, who darted from the wickiup without hesitation. The pain subsided gradually, leaving Sarah breathless and frightened. "It's too early," she whispered, fear constricting her throat. "And the baby can't come yet." Running Wolf knelt beside her, his face a mask of concern. "Dove's wing will help. She has delivered many children." "But what if something goes wrong?" Sarah's voice trembled. "What if?" "Do not think of what if," he interrupted firmly. "Think only of now. Breathe, be strong." Dove's wing arrived moments later, Little Sparrow at her heels. The healer took one look at Sarah and began issuing rapid instructions. Little Sparrow hurried to comply, gathering water and various pouches of herbs and roots. After a quick examination, Dove's wing spoke urgently to Running Wolf, who translated for Sarah. She says, "Child is coming. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. Cannot stop it now." Terror washed over Sarah in an icy wave. "It's too soon," she repeated desperately. "And Thomas, he doesn't even know." "Cannot reach husband now," Running Wolf said, his voice gentle but firm. "Must focus on birth." Dove's wing prepared a different medicine, stronger smelling than the previous concoctions. She helped Sarah drink it, then arranged additional furs beneath her for comfort. Through gestures and the few English words she knew, she indicated that Sarah should rest between pains, conserving strength for what was to come. As the healer worked, Running Wolf stepped outside briefly. Sarah could hear him giving orders, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of command. When he returned, his expression was resolved. "I have sent riders to watch soldier camp," he explained. "Others prepare for possible fight." He knelt beside Sarah again. Swift Knife wanted to move camp. I said no. Too dangerous for you now. The implications of his decision weren't lost on Sarah. You're risking your people for me, for you, for child. His dark eyes held hers steadily. For what is right? Another contraction seized her, more powerful than the last. Sarah clutched Running Wolf's hand without thinking, her fingers digging into his palm as she rode out the wave of pain. He didn't flinch or pull away, his strength anchoring her through the storm. When it passed, she released his hand, embarrassed by her instinctive reach for comfort. I'm sorry. No need, he said simply. Dove's Wing returned with an elderly woman whose face was etched with the wisdom of many years. The old woman studied Sarah with keen eyes, then nodded to herself and began laying out items from a leather pouch, small carved figures, feathers, and stones arranged in a pattern around Sarah's bed. Who is she? Sarah asked. A White Feather, Running Wolf replied. Oldest woman of tribe, knows ancient birth songs. As if on cue, White Feather began to sing, her voice thin but clear, the melody unlike anything Sarah had ever heard, haunting, rhythmic, somehow both sorrowful and joyful at once. She sings to spirits, Running Wolf explained softly, asks them to protect mother and child. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes at the unexpected kindness. Why would she do that for me, a stranger, a white woman? Running Wolf's expression softened. Birth is sacred. All women who bring life are connected. He paused, choosing his words carefully. White Feather lost daughter in childbirth many seasons ago. She says no mother should face that journey alone. The old woman continued her song, and somehow, despite the pain and fear, Sarah felt a strange calm begin to settle over her. Here, far from everything familiar, surrounded by people who had every reason to hate her, she was being offered something precious, compassion that transcended the boundaries of race and history. Another contraction came, stronger still. As Sarah gasped through it, Dove's Wing checked her progress and spoke urgently to Running Wolf. What did she say? Sarah asked when she could speak again. Running Wolf's face was grave. She says 2 heartbeats. 2 children come. Twins, Sarah whispered, shock washing through her. That's not possible. The doctor in Pennsylvania only heard 1 heartbeat. But even as she protested, Sarah knew it was true. The unusual size of her belly, the constant movement she had felt these past months, not 1 active child, but 2. Twins are sacred to Apache, Running Wolf said, a note of awe entering his voice. A powerful medicine. Another contraction gripped her, barely enough time to recover from the last. Sarah cried out, the pain more intense than anything she had imagined. I'll die here, she gasped when she could speak again, far from Thomas, among strangers. No, Running Wolf's voice was fierce with conviction. You will not die. Your children will not die. He took her hand again, his grip strong and certain. I will not allow it. Outside, White Feather's song rose higher, joined now by other women's voices. Dove's Wing prepared for the birth with calm efficiency, Little Sparrow at her side, and through it all, Running Wolf remained, his presence a bulwark against the tide of pain and fear threatening to overwhelm Sarah. As the next contraction built, Sarah looked into the eyes of the Apache chief, a man who should have been her enemy but had become her protector, her anchor in a world turned upside down. In his steady gaze, she found not just compassion, but something deeper, something neither of them had names for but both recognized. Whatever happened in the hours ahead, Sarah knew with sudden clarity that nothing between their peoples would ever be quite the same again. Time lost all meaning as Sarah's labor progressed. The sun climbed to its zenith, began its descent, and still the twins delayed their arrival. Each contraction brought Sarah closer to exhaustion, her body trembling with effort, her voice reduced to raw whispers after hours of crying out. Through it all, the Apache women remained steadfast. Dove's Wing directed the birth with quiet authority, her hands sure and gentle. Whitefeather continued her songs, sometimes alone, sometimes joined by a chorus of women who had gathered outside the wickiup. Little Sparrow bathed Sarah's forehead with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement in her limited English. And Running Wolf stayed, defying all custom and convention. Childbirth among the Apache was women's domain, no place for a warrior, much less a chief. Yet he refused to leave, positioning himself at Sarah's head, supporting her shoulders during the worst contractions, offering water between pains, his presence a constant in the storm of her labor. "Cannot," Sarah gasped as another contraction built, stronger than the last. "Too tired." "You can," Running Wolf insisted, his voice low and fierce in her ear. "You must." Dove's Wing spoke urgently, gesturing for Sarah to push. "First child comes," Running Wolf translated. "Push now, hard." Sarah gathered her remaining strength and bore down, a cry tearing from her throat. The pain was searing, all-consuming. Just when she thought she could endure no more, a sudden release, and Dove's Wing was lifting a tiny, red-faced infant. The baby's cry, thin but determined, filled the wickiup. "A son," Running Wolf breathed, something like wonder in his voice. Dove's Wing worked quickly, wiping the infant clean, checking his small body with practiced hands. She wrapped him in a soft rabbit skin and, to Sarah's surprise, placed him in Running Wolf's arms rather than her own. There was no time to question this, as another contraction seized her. The second birth came faster, the path already opened by the first child. With 3 mighty pushes, Sarah delivered a second son, smaller than his brother but with surprisingly strong lungs. This child, too, Dove's Wing cleaned and examined before passing him to Little Sparrow to hold. Only after attending to Sarah, stopping the bleeding and applying a poultice of herbs, did the healer indicate that the babies should be given to their mother. Running Wolf gently placed the first twin in the crook of Sarah's left arm. Little Sparrow followed with the second, positioning him in her right. For the first time, Sarah looked upon the faces of her children, tiny, perfect, with reddish-tinged skin and wisps of dark hair. "They're so small," she whispered, fear mingling with overwhelming love. "Strong," Running Wolf countered. Like mother, Sarah looked up at him, seeing not just the stern warrior but the man who had stood beside her through the most harrowing experience of her life. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking, "for everything." A commotion outside interrupted the moment. Raised voices, the sound of running feet. Running Wolf straightened, instantly alert. He exchanged words with Dove's Wing, then slipped out of the wickiup. He returned moments later, his expression grim. Soldiers moving closer, scouts as they follow trail to camp. Fear clutched at Sarah's heart. "They can't find me here. They think what they wish to think." Running Wolf cut her off. "Council meets now to decide. Decide what?" His eyes were somber, whether to fight or flee. The enormity of the situation crashed over Sarah. Her presence, the birth of her children, these had put the entire Apache community at risk. If the soldiers believed she had been captured, they would attack without hesitation. Men would die, perhaps women and children too. "Let me speak to them," she pleaded. "I'll tell them the truth." Running Wolf's expression didn't change. "Rest now. Council will decide." He left again, and Sarah looked down at her newborn sons, their tiny faces peaceful in sleep, unaware of the danger surrounding them. How could she protect them? How could she prevent bloodshed? Dove's Wing approached, kneeling beside the bed of furs. She studied the twins with keen eyes, then reached out to touch each one on the forehead, murmuring words Sarah couldn't understand, but recognized as a blessing. Dove's Wing says twin boys, powerful medicine. Little Sparrow translated hesitantly. First son come as sun touch mountain. Second son come as shadows grow. Day and night brothers. Sarah looked from one tiny face to the other. Born at sunset, between day and night, one slightly larger and ruddier, one smaller and paler. Day and night, she repeated softly. Must name soon, Little Sparrow added. Names protect from evil spirits. Sarah had discussed names with Thomas in their letters, but they had only chosen one boy's name and one girl's. Never had they imagined twins. I don't know what to call them, she admitted. White Feather, who had been sitting quietly since the births, suddenly spoke up, her thin voice surprisingly strong. Little Sparrow listened, then turned to Sarah. White Feather says in old days, twin boys were called Strongheart and Swift Arrow, brothers who saved tribe during great hunger. She hesitated. She says, perhaps these twins also bring salvation, not destruction. Sarah considered the old woman's words, touched by their unexpected hope. Strongheart and Swift Arrow, she repeated, testing the names on her tongue. They were beautiful names, powerful names, but not the names her husband would expect for his sons. Before she could dwell on this, Running Wolf returned. His face was etched with tension, but he moved with the deliberate calm of a leader determined not to show fear. Council divided, he reported. Swift Knife and others want to leave you for soldiers to find. Say it will prove Apache innocent of wagon attack. Abandon a woman and newborn babies. Sarah was horrified. That's others disagree, Running Wolf continued. Say it would be great dishonor. What do you say? Sarah asked, though she thought she knew the answer. Running Wolf's gaze was steady. I say you are under my protection, you and your sons. A sudden commotion erupted outside, shouting, the sound of horses approaching fast. Running Wolf reached for his knife, moving to the entrance in one fluid motion. Stay here, he ordered. Whatever happens, protect the children. He was gone before Sarah could respond, leaving her clutching her newborn sons to her chest, their tiny hearts beating against her own like frightened birds. The sounds outside intensified, more shouting, now in English as well as Apache, orders being given. The distinctive metal-on-metal sound of rifle chambers being loaded. Sarah looked down at her twin sons, then at the Apache women who had helped bring them into the world. Dove's Wing stood protectively near the entrance, a bone knife in her hand. White Feather continued to sing softly, seemingly oblivious to the chaos. Little Sparrow trembled visibly, but remained at Sarah's side. In that moment, Sarah made a decision. Weak as she was, sore and exhausted from childbirth, she would not cower while others decided her fate, or that of her children. Help me up, she said to Little Sparrow. I need to stop this before it's too late. Little Sparrow's eyes widened with alarm. Cannot, just had babies, too weak. Help me, Sarah insisted, already struggling to sit up, cradling one twin in each arm. Oh, too many will die if I don't. Dove's Wing noticed the movement and hurried over, speaking sharply to her daughter while pressing Sarah back down. Her message was clear even without translation. Stay, rest. Please, Sarah pleaded, looking directly into the healer's eyes. I must stop this. My sons. She glanced down at the newborns. They need both worlds to live. Something in her words or expression must have reached Dove's Wing. The healer studied her for a long moment, then gave a single, reluctant nod. She spoke to Little Sparrow, who immediately began gathering blankets. Wrap babies warm, Little Sparrow translated. Mother says you crazy white woman, but brave like Apache. Together they wrapped each twin securely, then helped Sarah to her feet. Pain shot through her body, her legs trembling with weakness. Dove's Wing supported her on one side, Little Sparrow on the other, as they moved slowly toward the entrance. Outside, chaos reigned. A line of mounted soldiers faced a semicircle of Apache warriors, weapons drawn on both sides. Running Wolf stood at the front of his people, tall and unyielding. Facing him was a U.S. Army captain, his uniform dusty from the trail, but his authority unmistakable. "Where is she?" the captain demanded. "We know you took a white woman from the wagon train. Hand her over now, or by God, we'll take her by force." "No white captives here," Running Wolf replied, his English clear but tense. "Leave Apache land." "You lying devil," spat a civilian rider next to the captain, a man with a shock of red hair and a prospector's weathered face. "We found the wagon, saw your arrows, your tracks." Sarah froze at the voice. She knew that voice. "Thomas," she whispered. Little Sparrow looked at her in surprise. "You know?" "My husband," Sarah confirmed, her heart pounding. The standoff continued, tension building like a thunderhead before a storm. Swift Knife and his warriors fingered their weapons eagerly, clearly hoping for battle. The soldiers' rifles remained trained on the Apache, ready to fire at their captain's command. "Last chance, Chief," the captain warned. "Produce the woman or face the consequences." Running Wolf's expression was stone. "There is no captive, only guest," the captain scoffed. "Guest? You expect me to believe?" "He's telling the truth," Sarah called out, her voice carrying clearly across the tense space. All heads turned toward the sound. With Dove's Wing and Little Sparrow supporting her, Sarah emerged from the wickiup, a twin cradled in each arm. She stepped forward on shaking legs, determined to be seen, to be heard. "Sarah!" Thomas's voice broke with disbelief. He dismounted in a scramble of limbs, pushing past the captain. "My God, Sarah!" "Stand back, Bennett," the captain ordered. "Could be a trick." But Thomas was already rushing toward his wife, only to pull up short at the sight of the bundles in her arms. His face, already pale with shock, drained of all remaining color. "Are those—" He couldn't finish the question. "Your sons," Sarah confirmed, tears welling in her eyes. "Born less than 2 hours ago." A murmur ran through both groups, soldiers and Apache alike. The captain dismounted, approaching more cautiously than Thomas, but with equal intensity. "Mrs. Bennett," he addressed her formally. "Are you being held against your will?" Sarah drew herself up as straight as her weakened body would allow. "I am not, Captain. These people have shown me nothing but kindness." "Kindness?" Thomas found his voice again, confusion and anger warring in his expression. "Sarah, the wagon train was attacked. Everyone killed. We thought—" "Not by Apache," Sarah interrupted firmly. "By bandits? White men? They murdered our traveling companions and were about to kill me when Running Wolf intervened." She turned her gaze to the Apache chief, who watched the exchange with guarded eyes. "He saved my life and the lives of your sons." Thomas looked from Sarah to Running Wolf and back again, struggling to reconcile this account with his assumptions. "But the arrows we found were Running Wolf's," Sarah acknowledged. "I used to kill the bandits, not our party." The captain stepped forward, skepticism etched in his weathered features. "Mrs. Bennett, you've been through an ordeal. Perhaps you're confused." "I am not confused, Captain." Sarah cut him off, her voice finding new strength. "I know exactly what happened. Running Wolf saved me when he could have left me to die. He brought me here when my babies threatened to come too early. His people's healer tended me. His warriors stood guard over me. She met the captain's gaze directly. If not for the Apache, neither I nor these children would be alive. A tense silence followed her declaration. The soldiers looked to their captain for direction, rifles still at the ready. The Apache warriors remained equally vigilant, Swift Knife and his followers still eager for battle, despite the unexpected development. Thomas approached slowly, eyes fixed on the tiny faces just visible within their blankets. "Twins," he whispered, awe momentarily displacing his confusion. "I have sons. Would you like to hold one?" Sarah asked softly. Thomas hesitated, then nodded, carefully accepting the bundle Sarah offered, the firstborn, the larger twin. He peeled back the blanket slightly to better see the infant's face. The baby squirmed, blinking up at this new person with unfocused eyes. "He's perfect," Thomas breathed, "but so small. Strong." Running Wolf spoke suddenly, "Like mother." Thomas's head snapped up, really looking at the Apache chief for the first time. Something unspoken passed between the men, recognition, perhaps, of their shared concern for Sarah and her children. The captain cleared his throat. "This is unusual, Mrs. Bennett. But if what you say is true, then it appears we've misjudged the situation." Swift Knife stepped forward suddenly, speaking rapidly in Apache, his tone aggressive. Running Wolf responded sharply, but Swift Knife continued, gesturing angrily toward the soldiers and Sarah. "What's he saying?" the captain demanded, hand moving to his sidearm. "He says white woman lies," Little Sparrow translated hesitantly. "Says Running Wolf betrays Apache for white man's woman." The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. Sarah felt the weight of every eye upon her, Apache and white alike. In that moment, she understood that more than her own fate hung in the balance. The future of two peoples, the lives of her sons, all teetered on the edge of violence. "I have never lied," she said clearly, looking first at Swift Knife, then at the doubtful faces among the soldiers. "And neither has Running Wolf. The truth is simple. Bandits attacked our wagon train. They killed everyone but me. They would have killed me too, but Running Wolf stopped them. He brought me here, where his people helped deliver my children before their time." She took a deep breath, gathering strength for what she needed to say next. "I have seen enough bloodshed. My sons have been born into a world divided by hatred and misunderstanding. I will not have them inherit such a legacy." With tremendous effort, Sarah took several steps forward, placing herself physically between the two groups, her remaining son clutched tightly to her chest. Thomas moved to stand beside her, their firstborn secure in his arms. "Look at these children," she challenged both sides. "Born of white parents but delivered by Apache hands. They draw breath because two people set aside their differences long enough to value life over vengeance." She turned to face the soldiers. "Captain, there are no Apache raiders to pursue. The real killers are already dead." Then to the Apache. "And the soldiers have not come to destroy your homes, only to find a woman they believed in danger." Finally, she addressed both groups together. "We have a choice now. Continue the cycle of bloodshed and retribution, or recognize that we share this land, this life." She looked down at the twins. "These children need both worlds to thrive. Perhaps we all do." A heavy silence followed her words. The captain studied her intently, measuring her sincerity. Thomas stood bewildered but supportive at her side. Running Wolf's expression remained unreadable, though Sarah thought she detected a flicker of something like pride in his dark eyes. It was White Feather who broke the silence. The elderly woman had emerged from the wickiup and now approached with deliberate steps, her face serene. She stopped beside Sarah and, to everyone's surprise, began to sing the same haunting melody she had sung during the twins' birth. One by one, other Apache women joined the song, their voices blending in harmony. Even little Sparrow added her clear soprano to the chorus. The warriors, including Swift Knife, lowered their weapons in response to this sacred sound. "What are they singing?" Thomas whispered. "A blessing," Sarah replied, "for new life, for our sons." The captain removed his hat, perhaps unconsciously responding to the solemnity of the moment. His men followed suit, rifles gradually lowering. Whitefeather completed her song, then spoke directly to Running Wolf in Apache. He listened intently, nodding once when she finished. Then he approached Sarah, Thomas, and the captain. "Whitefeather says twin boys born between day and night bring change," he translated. "Old ways end, new ways begin." He looked directly at the captain. "She asks if white soldiers come for war or peace." The captain hesitated, glancing from Running Wolf to Sarah to the infants. Whatever he saw in that tableau seemed to reach something human within his military bearing. "We came for Mrs. Bennett," he said finally. "It appears she's been found, safe and sound. If what she says is true about the bandits, then our business here is concluded." He cleared his throat. "No need for further action." It wasn't a declaration of peace, not exactly, but it was a step back from the precipice of violence. Running Wolf nodded, accepting this limited olive branch for what it was. "Apache remember friends," he said. "Remember enemies too." "As do we, Chief," the captain replied, the ghost of respect entering his tone. "As do we." Sarah swayed suddenly, her strength finally giving out after the extraordinary exertion. Both Thomas and Running Wolf moved to catch her, their hands meeting at her elbows. For a heartbeat, the white settler and the Apache chief supported her together, united in at least this one purpose. "She needs rest," Running Wolf said, stepping back to allow Thomas to fully support his wife. "Babies too. Sun sets soon. White soldiers camp here tonight. Continue journey tomorrow." The captain looked as if he might object to this arrangement, but Thomas spoke first. "Thank you," he said to Running Wolf, the words simple but weighted with genuine gratitude. "For my wife, for my sons." Running Wolf's gaze moved from Thomas to Sarah, then to the infants in their arms. "Children of two worlds," he said softly. "Perhaps they build bridge where we could not." As Thomas helped Sarah back to the wickiup, the tension in the camp slowly dissipated. Soldiers established their camp at a respectful distance. Apache warriors maintained a watchful presence but without overt hostility. A fragile truce had been established, not through treaties or negotiations, but through the unexpected alchemy of compassion, courage, and new life. Inside the wickiup, Sarah sank gratefully onto the bed of furs, the twins now peacefully sleeping after their dramatic introduction to the world. Thomas sat beside her, wonder and confusion still battling across his features. "Sarah, I don't understand everything that's happened," he admitted, "but I've never seen anything like what you did out there." He touched her cheek gently. You might have prevented a massacre." "Not just me," Sarah corrected tiredly. "Running Wolf could have left me to die. His people could have rejected me. The soldiers could have opened fire." She looked down at their sleeping sons. "Everyone chose life today. That's all that matters." As night fell over the camp, an unusual quiet settled, not the tense silence before battle, but the thoughtful hush of people confronting unexpected possibilities. Two peoples who had been enemies now shared a fire, united by the thin, wailing cries of newborn twins who belonged, somehow, to both worlds and to neither. And Sarah, drifting toward exhausted sleep with Thomas keeping watch beside her, found herself wondering what these children might become, born in a moment between cultures, their very existence a challenge to the divisions that had defined the territory for generations. "Gamey, what shall we name them?" Thomas whispered, gazing down at their sons. Sarah thought of Whitefeather's suggestion, strong heart and swift arrow. Names of power and promise, but also names that Thomas might not understand or accept. "Tomorrow," she murmured, too tired to navigate this complex territory. "We'll decide tomorrow." As she closed her eyes, Sarah could still hear the echo of Whitefeather's song in her mind, a melody that spoke of endings and beginnings, of bridges across chasms, of hope sprouting from the blood-soaked earth of their shared history. 2 years later, the summer sun hung high over Copper Springs, transforming the modest settlement into a shimmering mirage against the Arizona landscape. What had once been a scattered collection of tents and hastily constructed cabins was now a proper town, complete with a general store, schoolhouse, and church. The Bennett homestead, situated on the eastern edge of town, had flourished as well. 20 acres of cultivated land, a sturdy 2-story house, and a reputation that extended far beyond the territorial boundaries. Sarah Bennett stood on her front porch, watching 2 small figures race across the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. At 5 years old, the twins were bundles of perpetual motion, as different in temperament as they were similar in appearance. Matthew, the firstborn, was thoughtful and deliberate, his movements precise, his dark eyes missing nothing. Thomas had declared him a natural farmer, the way he studied plants and understood the rhythms of growing things. Michael, 7 minutes younger and slightly smaller, was quicksilver and instinct, forever climbing, running, testing boundaries. "Born with moccasins on his feet," Thomas would say, with a mixture of pride and exasperation. Both boys shared the same strong features: copper-tinged skin, a shade darker than their parents', and straight black hair that defied the Bennett family's traditional sandy coloring. They were living bridges between worlds, though they were still too young to fully understand what that meant. "Boys," Sarah called, "come wash up. Our guests will be arriving soon." The twins raced toward the house, their small bodies vibrating with excitement. Today was special, the 5th anniversary of what the townspeople now called the Covenant. Twice each year, once in summer and once in winter, representatives from the Black Mountain Apache came to Copper Springs for 3 days of trade, council meetings, and shared celebration. Likewise, twice a year, a delegation from Copper Springs would travel to the Apache settlement, bringing goods, medicine, and news from the outside world. It was an arrangement unprecedented in the territory, viewed with skepticism and sometimes outright hostility by authorities and neighboring communities. But it had held for 5 years, bringing prosperity and relative peace to both peoples. "Are they bringing sweet grass?" Matthew asked, referring to a young Apache girl close to their age. "And tall pine?" Michael added eagerly. "What I expect so," Sarah replied, helping them wash dust from their hands and faces. Their mothers are part of the trading delegation. Inside the house, Thomas was setting out the refreshments they had prepared: corn cakes, dried fruit, smoked venison. He looked up as Sarah and the twins entered, his expression warming. "All set out here," he reported. "Reverend Collins and Mayor Wilson should be arriving shortly." Sarah nodded, smoothing her apron nervously. These biannual meetings always filled her with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. As the primary architect of the Covenant, she felt personally responsible for its success. The clatter of wagon wheels announced the arrival of the town representatives. Reverend Collins, a broad-shouldered man with a surprisingly gentle manner, had initially been the most skeptical of the arrangement with the Apache. 5 years of peaceful exchange had gradually softened his position. Though he still approached these gatherings with caution, Mayor Wilson, by contrast, had embraced the covenant enthusiastically, recognizing the economic benefits of trade and the security that came with peace. A shrewd businessman before taking office, he had been quick to calculate the advantages of friendly relations with the tribe. Sarah, Thomas, the mayor greeted them warmly, tipping his hat to Sarah. And these young men must be Matthew and Michael, growing like weeds, I see. The boys ducked their heads shyly, pressing against Sarah's skirts. Despite their boldness in play, they were still reserved around townspeople they saw infrequently. "Any sign of our Apache friends?" Reverend Collins asked, scanning the horizon. "Not yet," Thomas replied, "but they're always punctual. Should be here by midday." As if summoned by his words, a small party appeared on the eastern ridge. 6 riders moving with the fluid grace that characterized Apache horsemen. Sarah felt her heart quicken, as it always did at these moments. 5 years had passed, but the memories remained vivid. The wagon attack, the arduous journey, the birth of her sons under extraordinary circumstances. The twins spotted the riders simultaneously, identical expressions of delight crossing their faces. "They're here!" Michael shouted, already racing toward the fence with Matthew close behind. The Apache delegation approached at a measured pace, neither hurried nor hesitant. At their head rode Running Wolf, now 50 years old, but still striking in his authority and presence. Age had not diminished him. If anything, the years had added a depth of wisdom to his bearing. Beside him rode Dove's Wing, her healing skills now legendary throughout the territory. Little Sparrow, no longer little, but a confident young woman, followed with her husband Grey Fox and their infant daughter. The final 2 riders were younger warriors, including one Sarah recognized with a start as Swift Knife, his scarred face unmistakable. He had been the most vocal opponent of the Covenant, and his presence in the delegation was unexpected. The riders dismounted at the edge of the Bennett property, securing their horses before approaching on foot. Running Wolf led them, his steps deliberate, his expression solemn, until the twins broke protocol and ran directly to him. "Running Wolf!" they cried in unison, stopping just short of colliding with him. A smile transformed the chief's stern features. He knelt to their level, addressing them in Apache, a language Sarah had insisted they learn alongside English. "Strongheart," he said to Matthew, using the Apache name given to him at birth. "Swift Arrow," he acknowledged Michael. "You grow tall and strong. Your spirits shine bright." The boys beamed under his attention, responding in careful Apache. Their pronunciation was better than Sarah's had ever been, their young minds absorbing the language with ease. Thomas stepped forward, extending his hand to Running Wolf in the white man's tradition. "Welcome, Chief. We're honored by your visit." Running Wolf clasped his hand firmly. The 2 men had developed a cautious respect over the years, their initial wariness giving way to genuine, if reserved, regard. "The honor is shared," Running Wolf replied, his English still accented but fluent. "We bring gifts and news." Sarah approached next, her composure maintained despite the emotions swirling within her. She had not seen Running Wolf since the winter gathering 6 months ago. Yet his presence always affected her deeply, a complex mixture of gratitude, respect, and something more profound that she had never fully named, even to herself. "Running Wolf," she greeted him simply. He inclined his head. Sarah Bennett. Those 2 words, her name in his voice, carried echoes of all they had experienced together. Life, death, birth, the forging of an unlikely peace. "Please," she gestured toward the house. "Come inside. We have much to discuss." The formal council meeting proceeded as it always did, reports on territorial developments, discussions of hunting boundaries, resolution of minor disputes between their peoples. Mayor Wilson proudly announced that the territorial governor had finally acknowledged the covenant in an official capacity, providing a measure of protection against outside interference. "It only took 5 years," Thomas remarked dryly. "White man's government moves slower than winter tortoise," Running Wolf replied, drawing chuckles from both sides of the table. Throughout the meeting, Sarah observed Swift Knife, who remained silent but watchful. His presence nagged at her attention, an anomaly she couldn't quite reconcile. When the formal business concluded, the gathering moved outside for the ceremonial meal that traditionally followed. Tables had been set up beneath the cottonwood trees, laden with food from both cultures: Apache flatbread alongside sourdough, venison stew beside beef roast, prickly pear preserves next to apple butter. As the meal progressed, Sarah finally found an opportunity to approach Running Wolf privately. He stood apart from the others, watching the twins play with sweetgrass and tall pine, the children oblivious to the cultural boundaries the adults still navigated so carefully. "They forget they are different," Running Wolf observed as she joined him. "Perhaps they're not as different as we think," Sarah replied. Or perhaps the differences don't matter as much as we believed." Running Wolf's expression remained contemplative. "They carry 2 worlds in their blood, not easy path." "No," Sarah agreed, "but an important one." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been pressing on her mind. Why did Swift Knife come today? He has always opposed the covenant. Running Wolf's gaze remained on the playing children. Swift Knife asked to come. "His sister's son is sick, wants to speak with Dove's Wing about White Doctor's medicine." "He's seeking white medicine." Sarah couldn't hide her surprise. "Child more important than pride," Running Wolf said simply. "Swift Knife learns this, slowly." He turned to face her directly. "Many things change in 5 winters." "Yes," Sarah agreed softly, "many things." A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with unspoken understanding. The sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the landscape in gold and amber hues, reminiscent of that fateful sunset when the twins had entered the world. "I never properly thanked you," Sarah said suddenly. "Not really. For saving my life, for helping bring my sons into the world, for standing with me when it would have been easier to turn away." Running Wolf studied her face, his dark eyes as inscrutable as they had been on the day they first met. "No thanks needed between us." "Nevertheless," Sarah persisted, "I want you to know that not a day passes when I don't recognize what you did. What you risked." She glanced toward her sons, now engaged in an improvised game of tag with the Apache children. "They are your legacy too, in a way." Something flickered in Running Wolf's expression, a brief softening, quickly contained. "They carry good spirits, will grow to be good men." "They ask about you," Sarah admitted, "between your visits. They call you the chief who walks between worlds." Running Wolf absorbed this with a slight nod. "Good name, better than Running Wolf, better than Sarah Bennett," she replied with a small smile. The hint of humor vanished as Running Wolf's expression grew serious. "There is news I did not share in council. White government sends new soldiers to territory, new fort being built near Canyon Creek." Sarah's heart sank. Canyon Creek was less than 30 miles from the Apache winter grounds. What does it mean for the covenant? Unknown. New captain may not honor old agreements. Running Wolf's gaze swept over the gathering. Apache and settlers sharing food, sharing conversation, sharing space without bloodshed. This peace is young, fragile still. "Then we must protect it," Sarah said with determination. The covenant has benefited both our peoples. Surely the new commander will see that. Perhaps, Running Wolf didn't sound convinced, or perhaps he sees only what he expects to see. Sarah thought of her own journey, how she had arrived in Arizona territory, carrying a lifetime of assumptions about the Apache, only to have those beliefs shattered by experience. Then we must help him see differently, she insisted, as you helped me. Running Wolf's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. You saw with open eyes, open heart, rare gift. Before Sarah could respond, the twins came running up, breathless from play. Mother, Matthew called. Sweetgrass knows a song about Coyote. Can she sing it for everyone? Michael nodded enthusiastically. Dee and Grey Fox promised to tell the story of how Coyote stole fire from the sun. Sarah exchanged a glance with Running Wolf, both recognizing the opportunity presented by the children's request. That sounds wonderful, she said. Let's gather everyone to listen. As the sun descended toward the horizon, Apache and settlers formed a circle beneath the cottonwood trees. Sweetgrass, shy at first but encouraged by the twins, sang the traditional coyote song, her clear voice rising into the evening air. Grey Fox followed with the ancient tale, speaking in Apache while Little Sparrow translated, the story flowing seamlessly between the two languages. When they finished, Reverend Collins surprised everyone by asking if he might share a story from his tradition. At Running Wolf's nod of approval, the Reverend recounted the biblical tale of Joseph and his brothers, a story of jealousy, forgiveness, and reconciliation. The parallel wasn't lost on anyone present. As the storytelling continued, with contributions from both cultures, Sarah watched the faces around the circle, illuminated by the last golden rays of sunlight, expressions of wariness gradually giving way to genuine interest and, in some cases, appreciation. The twins sat cross-legged between the two groups, unconsciously serving as living bridges. They belonged fully to both worlds and, paradoxically, to neither, a new generation that might, with proper guidance, transcend the divisions of the past. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit, casting warm pools of light across the gathering. Mayor Wilson proposed a toast to 5 years of peace and prosperity, raising his cup in a gesture that included everyone present. Even Swift Knife, after a moment's hesitation, lifted his cup in acknowledgement. Later, as the Apache delegation prepared to depart for their camp at the edge of town, Running Wolf approached the twins. From his pouch, he withdrew 2 small items, carved wooden figures of a hawk and a fox, polished to a warm glow. "For strong heart," he said, presenting the hawk to Matthew, "to see far and clear." "Thank you," Matthew replied solemnly in Apache, accepting the gift with both hands as he had been taught. "Do for swift arrow," Running Wolf continued, giving the fox to Michael, "to move with wisdom and purpose." Michael's "thank you" was equally ceremonious, though his eyes danced with delight at the gift. Running Wolf straightened, looking from the boys to Sarah and Thomas. "They carry the future in their hands," he said quietly. "A future we only begin to build. A future worth building," Thomas affirmed, placing his hands on his son's shoulders. As the Apache mounted their horses and rode toward their camp, the twins clutched their carved animals, precious gifts from a man who, in another time, another place, might have been their enemy. Sarah watched them go, her mind traveling back to that desperate day in the desert, a pregnant woman saved by an unlikely protector, 2 lives converging against all odds. How many small decisions, she wondered, had led to this moment? How many chances for hatred, for violence, for separation had been set aside in favor of compassion, courage, and connection? "They're remarkable boys," Thomas said, joining her on the porch as the twins finally succumbed to sleep inside. "Not what I expected when I sent for you from Pennsylvania, but—" He smiled, taking her hand. "More than I could have hoped for." Sarah squeezed his fingers gratefully. Thomas had surprised her in many ways over the years. His acceptance of the twins' dual heritage, his willingness to honor her commitment to the covenant, his growing respect for Running Wolf and the Apache ways. Their marriage had deepened through challenges she could never have anticipated when she began her journey west. "Do you think it will last?" she asked softly. "This peace we've built." Thomas considered the question seriously. "I don't know," he admitted. "The world is changing fast. New settlers arriving daily, the railroad pushing west, the government's policies shifting with every election." He looked out toward the distant mountains, dark silhouettes against the star-filled sky. "But what we've created here matters, Sarah. It proves what's possible when people choose to see each other as human first." Sarah thought of Running Wolf's warning about the new fort, the uncertain future facing their fragile accord. "The boys will carry it forward," she said with sudden conviction. "Whatever happens, they've been raised to honor both sides of their story. They'll remember." In the quiet darkness of the Arizona night, with the settlement of Copper Springs sleeping peacefully below, and the Apache campfires visible as distant pinpricks of light on the eastern ridge, Sarah Bennett felt a rare moment of certainty. The path forward would not be easy. Peace never was, especially peace built across chasms of history, culture, and pain. But in the sleeping forms of her twin sons, in the unlikely alliance between a settler community and an Apache tribe, in the annual gatherings that celebrated their shared humanity rather than their differences, she saw the seeds of something profound. 5 years earlier, a pregnant woman had faced death in the Arizona desert. An Apache chief had made a choice contrary to generations of bitter experience. Together, they had created not just a momentary truce, but the possibility of genuine understanding. They called it bloodlines, Sarah murmured, almost to herself. "What's that?" Thomas asked. "Something Whitefeather said when the twins were born. That blood spilled in anger had divided our peoples for generations, but blood shared in life, in birth, could bind us together." She smiled at the memory of the old woman's wisdom. She said the twins carried bloodlines that would reach into the future, connecting what had been torn apart. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "Wise woman." "Yes," Sarah agreed. "She was." As they stood together in the peaceful night, Sarah's thoughts returned to Running Wolf, the unlikely guardian who had changed the course of not just her life, but the lives of countless others through his single act of compassion. Their paths had crossed briefly, but with consequences that continued to ripple outward like stones cast into still water. The future remained unwritten, the peace they had forged still vulnerable to the winds of change sweeping across the territory. But for tonight at least, two peoples rested without fear of each other. And two small boys, carrying the legacy of both worlds in their blood and bones, dreamed beneath a shared sky, proof that even in the harshest landscapes of human division, understanding could take root and grow. In the end, Sarah reflected, that might be the most powerful legacy of all, not treaties or covenants, but the simple, revolutionary act of seeing humanity in the face of the other, of reaching across divides not with weapons, but with open hands, of recognizing that the bloodlines that truly matter are those that connect us all beneath the artificial boundaries we create. As if in answer to her thoughts, a coyote called from the distant hills, a long, wavering note that hung in the night air like a question. After a moment, another voice answered from a different direction, the two songs weaving together across the darkness. Different voices, Sarah thought, same song.